happy to bring on this next guest. I've actually been trying to get him on for a while. We try to have kind of holistic coverage of all the sports, but the Pistons too, and we've had a lot of different pundits on. But Kyle's got a great expertise in contracts and team management. We focus on that a lot. So I thought, well, no better person to have on after the trade deadline here. But I know you're a basketball fan on the whole here, Kyle. So I'm curious what you thought of the All-Star game and the festivities this year, since we just had that this weekend.
Yeah, Ryan, it's great to hop in. I'm glad we could make it work. Yeah, the festivities were great. I thought it was really entertaining. I thought the format really lent itself to increased competition, and obviously Wemby really caring about it helped with like some of the other guys really, buying in. And so I think it was a lot of fun. It was fun to see JB and Cade and Duran work together. It really looked like a Pistons game at times, the way the offense they're running and locking in on defense. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I think like you said, the dedication to defense was really preeminent this year between JB. I think all those factors they talked about, JB being one of the coaches, he wasn't going to let guys slack off, especially his two guys that were on his team, Cade and Duran. And then, Wemby, I mean, he's just different. I don't think I've ever seen someone so mad over losing a game at the All-Star game.
Yeah, his reaction was very funny on like the fact that after the first game we were talking about a botched defensive rotation in the All-Star game definitely showed you that something was different this year. I don't know if it'll last every year, if it was the format or what, but it definitely worked this year.
We covered the All-Star games both on the hockey side and basketball side last year, and it wasn't unique to have this opinion. I'm not taking a victory lap on the opinion, but I remember watching the Four Nations and on the hockey side of things and thinking this would work very well with the Pistons, because I was just talking about this with our hockey guest, Keith Gave, the Red Wings former beat writer and author of a bunch of Red Wings books. We were talking about how I was actually at the 92 Olympic trials in Oregon and how that expanded the reach of the game as a whole on the NBA side of things. And now it is a very worldly game. I mean, those names that are on the world team, I mean, if you're starting with names like Doncic and Jokic and Wemby, you've got a good team. It doesn't matter who else you put on there. There's a lot of other good players on that team. And so with how international it is, anytime you wrap the flag around something, that gives you more passion, makes it have more interest from people as a whole. We're seeing that with the Olympics right now. People care about pushing a stone down an icy path with a squeegee behind it. As long as you put it in terms of a country, you're not really seeing anybody follow shuffleboard that closely at the local places here, as far as I've seen. But no, there is a lot of passion for it as a result of that, and so I'm hoping they do hold that. I think the shorter games helped a lot too, because they couldn't take that first quarter off. They couldn't have the dunk fest that they normally have because the games were only a quarter.
Right. Yeah, I think the shorter format definitely helped. I thought it was interesting to have the championship games still. I'm glad, obviously, that they did, because we got more basketball and got to see Cade and those guys win it. So they might tweak that, because I don't know what would have happened if the world had won by 2 points in the last game. They would have all been tied. So I'm curious how they would have figured that one out. But yeah, it was definitely entertaining, and because it kind of features a worldwide thing. And I think with it being the Olympics right now, it definitely fit the theme of that. And so I'm interested to see if they'll continue doing it in the future.
Exactly. I wouldn't mind multiple world teams too, or just having I don't know how you would do world. You could do world maybe against the U.S., but yeah, thankfully with the international flavor to the game now, you've got more options. But want to talk about those Pistons had three. Well, I guess I don't know how many we're considering. I think the DJ made the All-Star game. Do we count him, Kyle? I think the Pistons DJ made it.
whatever is tied to the Pistons that was there, we're going to count it.
Yeah, I think he made 4. I forget the gentleman's name, unfortunately, but I remember that announcement during one of the Pistons games. But this has been a fun team. I'm sure, like everybody else, you've been overjoyed with the turnaround here. It is an amazing turnaround that they've made, and I'm sure you're like this as well. I'm the type that it doesn't matter if they had a season like a couple seasons ago. I'm still watching every game. Doesn't matter if they're piling up losses. There's still things to learn, and I think we're seeing that. They've got the young core from that time frame, and one of the main guys that I wanted to cover with you, because I haven't spent as much time as I'd like to on him, even though he's had such a great, unique season. But you've done a very good job of covering the contract situation of Danis Jenkins. We've been talking about him on the show basically since the inception of the show, because he had just come off of a very good summer league performance, and I was saying, hey, you got to watch out for this guy. He's got some very transferable skills to the NBA. We were talking to some scouts on the show about him, and I'm just very pleased to see him come to fruition here. We're also friends with Chad Bush, the Motor City Cruise announcer, and he was basically saying, like, yeah, I was seeing him every day. This is what it was looking like. So I'm glad they finally got him converted here and on the roster, because I think his play over the course of the season has kind of led to what they could do at the trade deadline too, because you had the ability to go, okay, we kind of had a dearth of backup guards, the backup ball handlers behind Cade, and now this year we almost have too many. So they needed to adjust the minutes there, because as I cover on the show a lot, you've only got 96 minutes between those two positions. You got to spread them out amongst a lot of guys. Cade's got to get his minutes. Duncan's playing the 2 a lot. You've got to get those guys in there, and there were just too many bodies. So unfortunately, that meant that there was no chair for Jaden Ivey at the trade deadline. But I'm curious how you saw all that with both the conversion and then the Ivey trade here.
Yeah, no, I think you summarized it pretty well. Jenkins' emergence definitely shortened the runway for Ivey. It was already going to be a condensed runway because of how good the team had been. But I think going into the season, even like a month or two in, there was a sense that, like, if we can get Ivey right, this is still going to be what's best in the long run, both either for this team or just an asset management standpoint, right? But Jenkins earned his minutes, and frankly, there was a lot of minutes he wasn't getting because they needed to try to give Ivey some space to get back, and then Sasser came back too, and obviously with LeVert being in there, so. Yeah, I mean, Jenkins really did kind of snatch his chain, so it were. It's like this is kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, it kind of forced the hand to give Ivey a fresh start somewhere else, which is really what I think the trade was about. Yes, they got Herter, who I think they do think can contribute. I know he hasn't shot the 3 well right now, but that's not really all that he does. And I think he has a chance to, over the last 30 games or so, whatever it is, like, he has a chance to show why he might be valuable next year on a much smaller contract, but could be another guy next to Duncan that can space the floor, but also give good optionality with passing the ball and the way he plays defense. So I know I'm tangenting off of Jenkins, but Jenkins really kind of precipitated his play, and his emergence really precipitated that. And he just looks like a guy who belongs. And so, I think early on, I think it was maybe a few weeks after he started playing regularly, I put an article on Detroit Bad Boys about what his contract situation would look like. And it played out a little differently than what I expected, but it's a great deal for the Pistons, quite frankly. I thought for sure he was going to convert, and then he's going to want to try to get money this offseason. And he could have gotten close to $60 million over 4 years this offseason if he had done that route. I don't know if anyone would have offered all of that, but he could have. That would have been his max. So it's a great deal for Trajan to use up some of the biannual this year and get him locked in with a team option. I think that was a real win, having that team option next year. So it gives them a lot of optionality, which if you follow the Pistons, you know that's Trajan Langdon's favorite word is optionality, and boy, do the Pistons have it for this summer.
Exactly. You're leading to a lot of paths I want to go down with you, especially the summer, because I'm sure we'll have you back on, time permitting, when that actually happens, and towards the off season, since that's one of your areas of expertise. But I'm glad you went through that with Jenkins and the situation, because I mean we've had Javen Hunter on the show. He's a friend of the show, Jaden's dad, and we talked about Jaden the whole time. It just didn't seem like it was destined to work here for a lot of reasons. You could write up and think up a lot of reasons of why it should work, and on paper it really should have, but in execution, it just didn't. Yes, the injuries factored in. There was a little bit of a duplicative skill set thing, but I kept seeing flashbacks of what the Kings had with De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton. And then somehow, no offense to this former Piston, but then somehow, fast forward a couple years later, they ended up with Dennis Schroeder and an aging Russell Westbrook as their primary lead guards, and ended up with neither Fox nor Halliburton, and Halliburton was basically one Achilles away from a finals victory here. And so the Pistons managed the situation well, as far as, okay, we're not gonna get into that situation. And then Ivy's injury obviously added to how things went, and then with the player acquisitions that they made, both through the draft and then free agency, it just made it so, okay, well, yeah, Jenkins is ahead of schedule. Sasser, like you said, fills a specific role, and then Ivy was looking a little duplicative. I think he can be very good in Chicago. I questioned at first why Chicago traded for him, not talent wise, but then they had a bigger guard overload than the Pistons did, but they alleviated that some as the trade deadline progressed.
Yeah, I mean, Chicago is very curious. Like, I still don't fully understand, to be honest, but I think it's the same reason why we all thought Ivy could play next to Cade, right? They've got Giddey there, and having Ivy next to him, if Ivy can get right. He's a second draft buy low guy. They'll have rights for him. And so maybe they think that he's worth bringing back on a cheaper deal. But at the very least, I think it was to get off Herter's contract and to do some other things, get off Saric's contract. And so that was they were obviously wheeling and dealing a lot. So I'm sure it had to do with their tax level or certain things like that. I haven't gone deep dive into all their moves, but they definitely have too many guards, but they also were finally, for the first time in forever, deciding to lose some games on purpose. And so it's probably good for them in the long run.
Yeah, thankfully we don't have to work out their cap situation too much, but I do want to talk about Detroit, especially going forward here in the summer, because we were talking about this before you came on. We were talking about it from the Lions' perspective, how when you make a trade, there's a bunch of layers to those trades. It's not just about this asset for these assets. There's all this undercurrent, and so I want to talk about that with the trade and with how they're setting themselves up for the summer with that optionality you mentioned. So we'll take a quick break and then come back with Kyle Metz. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Kyle Metz, having a good conversation about the Pistons, both this season and beyond. Not that I want to get too far ahead, because I want to get your takes on the current season too, Kyle, but I just wanted you to expand a little bit on what you're talking about with the contract situation, because this does give them the ultimate freedom. One of the reasons I was starting to kind of turn on the idea of trading Ivy, because I was at one point kind of against it, but you just weren't sure what was going to happen with that contract situation. And I think they wanted to give themselves that optionality, be more in control of the situation over the summer. And now you've got that. You've got some room. You've got some cap space. You're in one of the better cap situations in the NBA, and you're going to have to start paying some people out. You've already done it with Cade. Stu's locked in to a degree, but Duran's having an all-star level season. Then you've got Thompson after him. You've got these people that you did invest in the draft, and so I'm curious how you kind of see the trade deadline coinciding with kind of that off season and what their priorities will be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think they're with everything that was moving to Duran taking a big leap really accelerated some things too, right? Because now, and it seems like in the summer, so just to clear some things up from what I was hearing and understanding, that Duran was pushing for the max already over the summer, and so there wasn't really going to be an extension that got done. And so it was always going to go to restricted free agency or this summer. They were always going to have to give him a new contract this summer, they were far enough apart. And Ivy was similar. He wasn't in a position where he wanted to accept a value deal. He wanted north of $30-some million, which that's the type of player you could argue he was before the injury. Some would disagree with that, but so I think what you're saying is they weren't going to be able to pay everybody. And I think something that we, especially as Pistons fans, we get really loyal, especially the draft guys. You know, how many times did we, many of us, at least on Pistons Twitter and fandom, like, think that Jordan Bone was going to be the next guy, right? Like, we fell in love with these guys that always had to stick around. They had to be, Saban Lee, he had to be part of the core four, and it was devastating when he didn't turn out to be that guy. But the reality is, over the last 20, 25 years, on average, the number of players on a roster for championship teams is like, they've actually drafted is like 2.5 tops. So most of the time, it is that you draft a lot of good talent and then you end up having to consolidate to get the pieces that fit best. That's how most championship teams are built. You have exceptions like the Spurs and the Warriors, but most of the time it's you get one or two stars that you drafted and everybody else gets traded away. And so that was always going to be the case. It's unfortunate Ivy was one of those. But there's a lot to look forward, right? Duran is probably going to get close to a max. He's probably going to get close to the max he can get is 5 years, $240 million, which is a lot of money. And it starts at $41.5 million this year. If he gets the max, he's going to get close to that. And so that definitely changes some of the calculus, right? If he was getting closer to 30, then you might be able to pay another guy 25 and still be navigating those tax aprons and things like that later. But him being close to that $40 million does put a strain on the cap sheet over the next couple of years. Now, I think he's probably worth close to that. And so you hope he lives up to that contract. But so what this does, it gives them a lot of options for this summer. Whether they could even become a cap team, they can operate over the cap or under the cap. They have a lot of options to go with, kind of depending on who they want to target after this playoff run. I think they'll know that.
Exactly. And I mean, I'm guilty of what I kind of accuse other people of doing with this Pistons team, but part of the reason I wanted to do it with you is because you do have such an expertise here. But I feel like, I don't know if you feel this way too, it feels like people are kind of fast forwarding through this season a little bit for a team that has proven to be very strong, has been firmly atop the conference for the majority of the season so far. It just seems like people, even leading into the trade deadline, were going, well, they need another this, they need to add this. And I get it that there's some things that they could clean up. They needed some shooting, and they're hoping that Herter can do that, as well as some other things, like you said. But with the depth of this team, with the experience from last year, with the coaching, with what they've done, I don't like the idea of writing them off here for this season. I'm not saying you're doing that, and I'm certainly not, but it just feels like that's what pundits, national pundits, and folks are doing here. They've always got somebody else that they like, and then sitting atop the Eastern Conference is the Pistons. But their playing style won't transfer to the playoffs. I don't know if I see that being the case. I actually think it could transfer quite well.
Yeah, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll definitely know that people accuse me of looking forward and always wanting to trade people. So they kind of forget what I do a little bit. But no, I get that. I do think it's the combination of because there are some obvious holes that the Pistons could fill and could be exploited in the postseason, like we saw with the Knicks last year. Beasley was on fire, had one of the best shooting seasons in NBA history, and then came up cold in the playoffs. And so if that happens again, that year we had two volume shooters in THJ and Malik Beasley. Now we have one, right? So if teams game plan around Duncan Robinson, this is the fear, right? If teams can take him out of the game, it has the potential to really hurt. Now, our defense is a different level this year, and I do think they have the ability to get through round one for sure. I think a deep playoff run is definitely possible, but it's not hard to see why people are like, well, let's see how this translates, because there are some obvious holes. Now, I think they have ways they fill those holes, and I think they have ways that they make up for that we're maybe underselling the way that the Pistons can do that. And I just think the Cavs run last year also, gave us a little trepidation. Like they steamrolled the regular season last year and then came up dud in the first round, right? And so I think that's part of or maybe it was the second round, but it was so people have some history there that they're concerned about. But I definitely think all of the metrics show that the Pistons have a chance to make a finals run. Whether they can win it all this year is yet to be seen, but they definitely have, all the analytics, the 40-20 rule, the strength of the remaining schedule, their top 3 seed. They have all of the markers of a championship contender.
I agree. And a lot of this is a war of attrition. That's why, like the Knicks team, obviously they don't have Thibodeau in charge, so maybe they're not going to be quite as run down by the time they make it to the playoffs. But we saw this in the Flip Saunders era of the Pistons and other places in the NBA, where the more minutes you give to your concentrated core group in the regular season, sometimes that can wear them down, especially if they're aging. Now, the Pistons are a young team, but because of maybe some of the injuries, some of the rest, but also the depth, these guys they're going to have fairly fresh legs pending no major injuries or anything like that when they get to the playoffs. And I know that we can get kind of enamored with, okay, well, Danis has come on. Paul Reed, when he plays, is very exciting. And no, I'm not proposing that Paul Reed plays 30 minutes in a playoff run, but there's also this depth that's helped them propel themselves to that well over that 40-20 rule, 40 wins before 20 losses, but also it's kept the legs fresh. And if somebody does go down or has a bad game, they do kind of have a next man up mentality, more so than I've seen in a lot of the other teams. It's one of the deepest teams in the league.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think that's what we saw with the Thunder last year. The depth makes a difference. And so I'm excited to see how it goes. I mean, I definitely think it helps. Typically I don't trust heliocentric offenses too much, and Cade carries a lot of load. If you can call it heliocentric, it's definitely close if it's not, right? And typically that tends to falter around the conference finals, like just from like a legs standpoint. So, but Cade seems to be getting better, and I think the depth can help with that. And it's nice that he's gotten to take some games where he's only had 20, 25 minutes, and they're blowing teams out. And so if they can continue to do that with their bench guys, I think they're set up for success.
And that's the other thing with the Herder trade. I know you talked about his shooting. I do think that there's got to be a measurable bump with when he gets in place here with the Pistons. He's a veteran, and I know people were focusing on, well, he really hasn't been shooting well. The situations he was in seemed like kind of tough formats to be shooting well. Now you're with the floor spacing created by Cade and Duren and all the movement that they have. He's going to get open, and I got to think that 3-point percentage is going to tick up, where that's basically the one place that they don't have a lot of depth. They don't have, like you said, that second volume shooter behind Duncan. So if they can tick everybody up as it goes on, as far as the 3-point shooting as a whole, but then fill Herder into, okay, yeah, now he's up to 5+ 3-point attempts a game, and he's making them at a level more comparable to his Hawks days rather than his Kings and Bulls days.
Right. Honestly, I think what gets taken for granted, as long as teams guard him like a shooter, and he can hit just enough shots to keep them honest to guard him like a shooter, it doesn't even have to be that great of a percentage. It's going to have the intended effect. And he's not a zero on defense, so you don't have to have him be, 15 points a night, 18 points a night to be effective. And so I think once they get him integrated, like, yes, if his shooting comes around, that's gravy. I mean, that's definitely the intended reason. That's that they sold, hey, we got more shooting, but teams still guard him as a shooter. And I think that's right now the important thing. Over the course of the series, if it doesn't happen, teams might adjust to that. And so, yes, that's where you kind of need to see him hit just enough to keep him honest. And so I think that's where if he can get up five threes a night, and that's his role, and can do some other things, I think that will suffice at least for this season.
That's the big buzzword now. It's just funny how these buzzwords get aggregated. Now the big buzzword is gravity, and he would have some more gravity than even a Jaden Ivey, who was doing fairly well on the catch and shoot, but he wasn't really pulling guys out like you would want. And you do have, although they are good players for this team, you do have a few guys that really have no gravitational pull. Thompson, Holland, their teams are usually pretty good with saying, okay, we'll live with this shot, with all the ball movement and the creators and the good players you have on this team. We'd much rather prepare for a crashing drive from you guys than an outside shot. So having one more guy that can pull somebody into that corner defensively is much more valuable.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm curious who else has stuck out to you here on the team as a whole. There's a lot of good choices. We talked about Danis. We talked about some of the other guys on this team, but I'm curious, who maybe is an unsung guy that has kind of drawn your eye over the course of the year.
I mean, Javonte Green has been a revelation, right? He is great on defense and is athletic and love his energy, and also can hit the three, at a decent clip. He has been, a great signing for this team, and I'm curious to see what they do with him next season, and if they can afford to keep him on a minimum. I think he's probably earned himself some money potentially, and so that's where it's going to start getting interesting to see how Trajan decides to prioritize the depth that he has created. I think they have some moves they can make to get rid of some redundancies on the roster, so that can happen. But that's kind of everyone right now. Everyone's always obsessed with cap room, right? So it's like, oh, we can get $29 million in cap room next year, but that also means losing all the guys we're raving about this year and the depth that they have, or at least letting them walk and hope they come back on a much cheaper deal, right? And so I think Javonte Green is a guy that I would hate to lose, and hopefully they find a way to keep him. And so that's ultimately why I think they're gonna be an over the cap team next year, I think, most likely. So they can keep his bird rights, or at least keep the early bird rights that they have on him, and try to it'll be non-bird rights. I'm sorry, it's getting late in the evening. But they have some easier paths to re-sign him if they stay over the cap. So he's a guy that I would like to see stick around.